before joining Dataiku, I was head of data science and business intelligence at Cox Automotive here in the UK. And before that, I was a consultant at Optimal BI in Wellington, New Zealand. And I worked with lots of different kinds of data and different sectors and had lots of different job titles over quite a long time. And what I want to talk about today is a problem in the way that business cases for AI are often built and how we think you can correct it. So we see organizations do this often, and part of their journey with Dataiku is to kind of move beyond some of the thinking that I'll critique here. So we're saying from the outset, there's nothing proprietary to Dataiku in this at all. So if the ideas resonate, if they're useful, please use them. Use them in whatever way you find useful. So why this topic, economics of AI? Well, the first reason is that, yes, we sell software at Dataiku, but our mission goes a bit beyond that. We like to, at any conference we attend, talk about what we think might not be getting enough attention. So what are the challenges that are the next challenges that people will meet, even if they solve the challenges in front of them? And also just selfishly from my own time in your position and thinking back to myself attending such conferences, why would people stick around and listen to a vendor talking? They better say something interesting. Otherwise, I've got something else to do properly. So that's why we try to, not really talk about Dataiku, but talk about some of the problems that we see out in the market and what people are trying to do. The other reason specifically about this topic is getting started is very, very easy now with AI. So compared to my own individual journey, all you need now to start experimenting with AI is a credit card and a little bit of data. And you can go very quickly on your experiments, on your proofs of concept these days for pretty low cost. But there's this great quote there from some luminaries, including Charles Davenport in the MIT Slow Management Review a couple of years ago. It's a very, very scary ratio. So this is why the economics of AI matter, because for every $1 you spend developing an algorithm, you must spend 100 to deploy and support it. So that's the ratio that probably should scare us, right? Because I think when we make our business cases to develop algorithms, to start working on AI, very few of us are thinking about the 100 times greater investment that we might need later. And then the other reason to talk about economics of AI is, us data people love talking about data topics. The panel that I was on yesterday got onto this subject as well. But everyone else in the business doesn't really care about data. They might say that they want to be data-driven, but that's not what motivates them. That's not what gets them up in the morning in the way that it gets us up in the morning. So what your stakeholders care about is money in some way, profit, cost, risk. And so hopefully what I talk about today gives you a little bit of some language that you can use to maybe convince some stakeholders of some things that you maybe have not convinced them of before. So just extremely, we can skip this. Sometimes I do this quiz, but I think I know the answers for you. So what is this problem that I mentioned with these conventional business cases for AI? Well, it can take a lot of convincing to get your stakeholders to invest in an AI initiative. So you may have some kind of funding to work on data and you're looking to do AI, or you might be looking to stand up a data capability, a whole data capability all at once. But if you think about all of the people, all of the technology you need to account for to get into AI seriously, pretty quickly the costs are going to pass $1 million, £1 million, £1 million, whatever, if you're going from a standing start. And so because of those really high upfront costs, right, you have to sell to the business some very high value use cases to get their backing. You have to say, give me $1 million to work on AI, and I will return you 10 or 100 million in benefits by maybe improving personalization of recommendations on your website, increasing the average order size, or as the previous talk was talking about, perhaps with a smarter approach to fraud detection, you can reduce your losses in e-commerce operations. So you need to make this argument, right? Give me money to build a capability because benefits will come back soon, but from these very specific use cases, typically. It's very difficult to sell up front, an entire capability. You have to do something that gets people interested in that way of building your AI initiative is fine to get started, but it does mean that everything you do is like a highly leveraged loan, right? So you've effectively borrowed a large amount of money from the business up front, and you've promised far greater returns, 10 or 100 times the returns, if they have faith that you will deliver. So there are lots of stories out there about where people fail to deliver, right? And then the stakeholders call them their loans and your initiative collapses. That's not what I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about is that the problem that this way of thinking about funding in business cases for AI generates, even if you are successful with these first few use cases. So you may be able to guess what kind of shape that is on the left and what might be below it. But what we see is that plenty of AI initiatives start. They're successful in delivering some of these big use cases, but no one thought about what came afterwards. And what comes afterwards is that if you don't attack those first use cases, if you don't work at the early stage in the right way, you can be successful early on, but still come to this point where the wheels start to fall off and you might fail. And so this is represented on this very simplified graph. First 10 use cases, let's think of that as the first, as the set of benefits, right, that funded your initiative to begin with. The bigger gray boxes, so they're more valuable, right? And they're probably more chunky. And that blue line is the revenue or the benefit, right, from delivering those use cases. And early on, right, it's starting pretty high, and that slope is pretty high. If you notice, what's happening to that cost line as you then move into the next 20 use cases, the next 50 use cases. Why does that cost curve not curving down? Why is it straight line? Well, it's because as you start delivering more and more use cases, the maintenance costs and the technical debt of what you've already built keep accumulating and keep getting worse and worse and worse. And I think there's a great quote from a Google paper a few years ago that called Machine Learning and AI, the high interest credit card of technical debt, which if you've ever built it, you've got that feeling. A lot of what we build in data science and AI is very experimental, and it's a good experiment, but it's a different kind of way of thinking about writing code or developing systems. It doesn't really, it's not production grade, right? And it's not built, it's built to get a quick result. It's not built to last a long time. And so this problem, it might be somewhere when you're in the next 50 use cases, it might be somewhere when you're in the next 20 use cases, or it could even happen in the first 10 use cases. If the costs of each use case don't start to come down pretty quickly, right, you're going to get into the period where the marginal benefit of the next use case doesn't add enough on the costs that you already have and the profit, the total benefit that you're delivering, because people and software can be expensive. The total benefit is zero. And we meet teams like that. Sometimes they're small teams, sometimes they're large teams. And they say we've got 5 or 50 or 500 models in production, but we can't actually do any more. We're stuck. We can't go any further. And the reason for that is the business case reason is, the rest of this iceberg. I know there's not many icebergs in the Middle East, but hopefully the metaphor resonates still. With an iceberg, the most of the mass is below the water, right? And so the same is true of the potential value of AI to your enterprise, but also opportunities, the challenges to get there. So yes, to find the iceberg in the first place, you're above the water and you're looking out for those high value initial use cases that stick out. But looking only for the obvious, easy stuff sticking out is deceiving, because they are precisely not common, right? When people say, go after the low-hanging fruit, that's low complexity and high value. Well, I've not met many of those in my career, and if you do, they will quickly run out. So the irony here is you can deliver all those use cases above the waterline, right, the top of the iceberg, and your initial investors in your initiative, in your AI business case, they might be really happy with what you did for them, but they will probably go on their way and be really happy with that. And IT will be happy too. They'll look at some overview and they'll see all these highly successful projects and they'll just think, oh, cool, done, delivered. But what they miss, and what you know, is that AI actually needs to become a capability that's embedded in every part of your organization, not just a special event. So the work of AI to transform your business is not like refreshing the website or opening an office in London or Dubai. It's not even like migrating to the cloud, right? Using AI to change your business is never done. And you get that, but it can be quite difficult to communicate to your business stakeholders to say, you gave us some money to start this thing. It's never actually done, and we need to keep building our capability indefinitely. But even if you were successful delivering the value above the waterline, you go back and you say, can I have some additional funding now to pursue additional use cases that it's not low-hanging fruit now. It's not easy. It's not high value up front. They're going to look at you like you're crazy, right? So we invested in what you told us. You delivered it. That's great. But now you're saying you want us to take an even riskier investment, right? So when you ask them that, or, the point here is, how do you avoid having to ask that question? How can you do things from the beginning that will give you a continuous stream of funding for your initiative? Because in investment terms, it's not enough to just repay that loan on those initial high value use cases, right? You've got to pay back the loan, and you've got to pay back interest, and you've got to build a capability that's going to survive and grow beyond the startup period. So if your investment case is only around use cases at the top of the iceberg, of course your funding is going to dry up, even if you're successful. People will be, your stakeholders will be happy, and your team will leave and go and work somewhere else, right? So in the rest of the presentation, I just want to share how we articulate, escaping from this trap. And that's all about taking what's hiding under the water, right? The iceberg that's under the water, the risk, the opportunity there, and surfacing it up in the right way from the beginning of your journey. So we're going to escape this trap in 3 stages, like climbing a complex mountain. And anytime you climb a mountain, it's good to know, where are we actually heading? So as you probably guessed, our vision is actually that AI is benefiting everyone in an organization. Everyone is using it to change the organization, change the way they work, and delivering additional value continuously, right? So our vision is that you transform your organization by applying AI everywhere that makes sense. So if you agree, and that's where you also want to go, first step is always get moving, right? So we talk about removing friction early on, right? So don't let that initial use case burn up all of the money in your pot by just getting things up and running. Speed is so important at the start of the initiative. What I've been talking about today is really the resilience, the repeatability, the ability to cross this kind of danger zone. Anyone who's climbed a hill or a mountain, it's easy to go too fast at the start, and it feels great at the top, but all of the danger and all of the fun and the opportunity is in the middle, right? And we call it resilience because it's about pushing into the unknown, beyond the obvious use cases, under the water, attacking the bottom of the iceberg, and you just don't know what is there. It's precisely the point. And so you need something other than use cases to get there. So how can you frame what you're asking for when you go and ask for that money, really, right? A business case with a different flavor, right? So if you manage to apply everywhere AI for the benefit of your organization and its people, the benefits go well beyond oh, we automated this, so we saved this, and then we saved this and saved this, right? So that transforming yourself is worth much more than just some of those individual use case benefits, right? And there's no use case that you can deliver. There's nothing that you can install in your technology that gets you those. There's a number of use cases that you need to deliver, and you need to deliver them in a way that gets you to this transformative moment, right? And so part of your funding, right, should be a story about how your use cases, even the high value, high priority initial ones, will blur the boundaries between data silos, right, from the beginning, right? So don't break down our data silos until after your 7th use case, right? Because by the time you get there, it'll be too hard a problem to solve and your initiative will stop, right? So you have to find a way to perhaps choose use cases that start the hard work that lots of people talked about yesterday in this conference of breaking down the data silos. So don't do a data silo breaking project and then come to AI. And don't start doing AI and then do a data silo breaking project. Use that initial funding to pick use cases that are going to demonstrate the value of breaking the data silos to begin with. There's another important point here, you know, the sort of vision of innovation that we often grow up with is, you know, people in white coats in laboratories looking at microscopes, right? Or geniuses standing up to the mountain and having an amazing dream, or the CEO comes up with a new business model overnight, right? Maybe that's innovation, but innovation by everyone, right? Innovation where any employee can notice something and potentially transform that process is going to beat innovation labs in the long run. So we talked yesterday in the panel I was on about different operating models, if you like, and you know, delivering your initial use cases in an innovation lab that is disconnected from the rest of the business to protect your valuable data scientists may not be a good way to get to the bottom of the iceberg, to get all the way up the mountain, right? Because again, even if you're successful in that innovation lab delivering some use cases, where are the next use cases going to come from? If your people are closer to the business, if the business is involved even in your early use cases, you're going to detect the signals of increasing demand. And you're not going to have this problem of we delivered the use case and then everyone thinks, oh, we don't need any more AI. Thanks, it's done. Goodbye. And then the ultimate goal is to change the way everyone is working with data and with their processes, to create more time, right, to continue blurring silos and innovating. And I won't play this video, but yeah, maybe I'll try. So the way we see this working in the organizations that get this far is once someone builds something and it's a use case, so that use case becomes the starting point for 2 other people's interesting thing. And not every use case generates this kind of huge exploding exponential effect, but this is the goal of what I'm talking about, is to get everyone building off each other. So that's how to talk about the value of getting to the top of the mountain, but I mentioned that the danger is in the middle. What is that danger? So when you're thinking about your business case and even those initial use cases, think about making these investments and selling these investments to your stakeholders, right? So assume that technology is going to change over the life of your AI initiative, right? Maybe you've just migrated to one cloud, maybe you're going multi-cloud, wherever you are, you know it's not the endpoint of what your CTO is dreaming about, right? So, and every data person hates rebuilding stuff in new tech stacks, right? So assume that technology is going to change, right? Because if you don't assume that, when you come to ask for more money or more funding, you're going to have to ask for 2 sets of funding to migrate the old stuff and to build new stuff. Again, not a very popular message for your stakeholders. Thank you, Jose. Yeah, just ROI. We could have another discussion about that, but that is essentially the point. You know, narrow economic AI is fine, but there's a lot of value and risk below that waterline that we need to think about building. Resilience is about being able to bounce back from unexpected things that happen, like pandemics, right? So again, if you isolate your innovative data people doing AI projects from the business, right, they're naturally going to have less diverse personas. Right? They're going to be those experts in the ivory tower, and they're not going to know what's coming. Right? They may have all the data, they may be building models that can forecast the future, but they don't know what's happening in the business and what's going to happen next. And so if you think about what's going to help you understand all of the other costs and all of the other value of what you could be doing, it's not going to come from you inside the data team. You need to get some people to be the headlights in your car on the road that you're going down. And then another topic that was touched on briefly yesterday in the panel I was on, it's a bit late once you've got models in production and they're affecting people to then think about responsible AI and how you translate your organization's efforts into what you're doing. You know, once those models are, you've set them free in the world and they're making decisions on your behalf, it's a bit late to say, oh, is anyone watching that model? Do we really know what it's doing? And so another way to build this resilience, right, to be ready to tackle the next use cases, ideally without asking for more funding or without having cost your business in fines or reputational risk, is to do things early on that might make you go a little slower, but which help you build AI responsibly from the very beginning. Just one note on that innovation model, right? So if you think about the square, there's 25 ideas. One of them is really good in the middle, right? So some people believe the CEO dreams of it. Some people believe that the lone genius toiling away is going to get there fastest. Some people say, let's lock our AI experts in the innovation lab and they'll get there fastest. And there's a lot of research now, and it's, you know, it makes a lot of sense on average, right? So there will be cases where individuals get there faster, but on average, a diverse bunch of freely collaborating stakeholders is going to get there faster because of the different perspectives that they're able to bring on a given problem. So, take-home message, returning to the iceberg. Yes, you're going to build some big, amazing use cases at the start of your AI initiative, but you have to think beyond that initial ROI. You have to change things along the way and invest in those things while you're delivering the use cases. Otherwise, you do 5 or 6, everything's great. Everyone loves you. They're not getting rid of you because you failed. They just think you did a great job and, oh, we're done fraud detection. We don't need to do anything else, right? But fraud in particular keeps evolving, right? So you actually need the capability to continually develop your fraud detection capability. So this is what I mean by building a broader business case beyond, we want some technology and some people to do some cool use cases. We need a capability that's going to be able to do this over and over and over and over again. All those lofty goals I talked about, you have to quantify them in some way, right? Your stakeholders, they might just nod and go, yes, we should build responsibly from the start. Yes, we should be robust to technical change. Quantify them, right? So everyone on this call has probably had to rebuild something they did in some other technology, right? It usually takes between 50 and 100% of the original time to do that, sometimes even more, right? So you can put that into money. You can put that into terms. You can say, look, unless we invest in a way of doing this that is going to be robust to the technical change, then I just saw that question in the chat from Mr. Hunt. We'll talk about that some other time. But you know, unless you put that into money terms, right, it's just one of those things that non-data people nod along with, right? But we've all rebuilt stuff. We've all had to deal with not having resilience, right? And so if you can put it in terms of the cost of rebuilding stuff, you know, you can start to put money around that problem. And then the biggest trick you have to pull off is all of these things I've been talking about, they're kind of long-term investments, right? They pay off long after the initial use cases are delivered. So you have to find a way within your organization, and we're happy to help with this, frame those as short-term superpowers somehow. So because we're building this long-term resilience, we will be able to help the organization do this or pivot in this way or deal with the pandemic whatever it might be. So there's lots more that we've written on this. You can find it on our website under Economics of AI. We've got a white paper. We're always developing more content. You can reach out to me to talk about that further. That is it. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I'm just with you as well. Thank you so much, Shaun, for the presentation. Jose, you have the microphone. Can you start the question again? Jose from AstraZeneca.
It was just really to highlight the point that Shaun was bringing up, that if we're just, at least from my experience, what I've seen in the organization is that it was indeed a cultural change. It was change management rather than just like more budget for marketing, where yes, in that sense, there should be some ROI there. But for us, it's really so much more than ROI. Of course, that can be there, but it's if you're going from zero to just analytics, the company change is so much more than that. So fully agree, Shaun.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Just Neslihan and from Hayat Holding, Turkey. Yesterday, she brought a lot of attention with her presentation and questions. She had this question. If you got the answer.
Hello.
Yes,
my question is about Dataiku. How do you define Dataiku differentiate from the competitors, from the ETL, from the if in any site? Can you please explain? Thank you.
That is a question that we could take 1 minute or 1 hour on. In terms of specific functionality, if you look at Dataiku, it does a lot of things that other people do. But I think what differentiates us is our vision that this should be accessible to everyone in the organization.